Hello, here we go. I was going to give you a sub-possible creation myth and legend, if I'd ever given one. But I was also going to draw, can you pick this up? Just a slight version, again, of using the picturization of the city, etc. But in this case, consider, I'm drawing it two-dimensionally. You can think about it three-dimensionally. But if you leave it three-dimensionally even, which is where most people's brain does leave it, or vice versa, that's according to whether you're good enough to tell whether the train went off and left you, or, looked at from another viewpoint, you went off and left the train. But look at it as being a hillside, and even another hillside, and down here in the valley. Topographically, it's of no great importance, but it just makes it easier to talk about this way, and I'm the one who made it up, so I can do it any way I want to, right? He said, right. But if you looked at, down here is what I've been calling the city. You know, every possible military complex, libraries, churches, the whole, everything that has to do with the city. And then consider up here is what I'm referring to as the hillsides. Down here is the full enjoyment, the full reality of human life. With no comment, yea or nay, things are not going down here, falling apart. It is blossoming down there. I know many people, ordinary intelligence, they just hate to hear that. But some of us are just spoiled sports in life, I'm sorry. But I was going to give you what might have been a subplot and a creation myth, if indeed I'd ever given you specifically my new creation myth. But the subplot, or sub-myth, might have been something like this. That everyone, that is humans, is born into, let us say, real primitive bushes up in here, feral brambles up in there somewhere. And then as they begin to talk, they go into, slice, they are taken into, and they begin to imitate the older animals. It all happens simultaneously. You can see them actually begin to imitate when they begin to talk. But they are taken into, drawn into the city. Very shortly, as soon as you begin to talk. So might have gone this myth, the sub-myth. That after being born up here, under conditions that I guess might have made little baby Moses' early sojourn down the river look somewhat like posh accommodations, but you're up here born where there are thistles and brambles and bushes, and it's quiet and it's dark, and of course it's dank, or if that's too strong, damp. But then you're drawn into the city. And all is well. You live out your days. Also the city, I keep using this picturization, amongst other expositions on my use of the term. The city, you can look at the operational definition. It's a city is any place where local views and conditions are taken to be a full statement, or at least a potentially complete statement of reality. That is the city at all times and all places. That is when you become, in the city sense, which it always helps to define yourself, because then you have, as they like to say in philosophical circles, you got it made. So in the city, defining itself as when you're in the city, as soon as you begin to talk, that is, you become civilized. You cease being simply a crude little, uncivilized, non-potty trained nipper, and you become daddy's little boy, daddy's little girl. You move into the city and you live out your days under conditions wherein local ideas, and it's of no importance, although ordinary people believe it is, because the city, wherever city you're in, says it is. And again, you have the great inspirational, if not staggering, arrangement of self-definition. But no matter what city you're in, it just seems to be of some importance whether you were growing up in the green city, in a Buddhist city, in a purple city, in a Catholic city. In other words, what seems to be cultural environments are of no importance. But wherever they are, they do seem to have their own specific local views and conditions, which, I repeat one more time, are of no universal consequence. Unless, of course, you are still smart enough to believe that your liver is superior, without any doubt, to your colon. And if so, then of course you got me, and I just helpless in the intellectual hands of a tyrant like you. But at any rate, living in the city under those conditions, wherever it is, local views, local ideas, local attitudes are taken as the full statement, or at least the potentially complete. And some of you should be getting good. All of that's the same. As long as you've got the potential for anything in the three-dimensional world, you have got the fulfillment of it. You have got the full execution. Because there are localities within localities. And just because you as an individual may not, from your own intellectual view, believe that you are experiencing the full cornucopia of intellectual, spiritual, emotional, cultural tidbits, it does not preclude, if you were thinking in a certain way, for you believing that you can, that they are there available. The feast is on the table. It's a matter of whether I'm educated enough, trained enough, whether I have time to deal with it. That's the same thing as local conditions, that is the city. Let me give you another expanded definition. The city always being that those inhabiting the city take the local ideas, no matter how they define them, but all local ideas, all local views of themselves, of life, of all dances, institutions, they take the local ideas as being the full statement, or the potentially full statement of reality. If you got that, you got the city. You have, at that level, a closed system based on self-reference, and so anything it says it means, it means. Anything it says is true because it is writing the dictionary. Also, even though this is two-dimensional, and I will be describing it at the very least three-dimensionally, everybody should be aware of it now, or you're about to be made aware, that all 3D models are spatially, or as that great philosopher Mattel says, anatomically, they are not spatially or anatomically correct, any 3D models. But do note this, neither is your brain. So we can press on, see it kind of balances out. Unless you don't like the idea of your brain not being anatomically and spatially correct, and then you might feel that somewhere along the line you've been shortchanged. But hey, don't look at me, my thumb is not on the scale. So we're back to people in the city being drawn down from the hillside. You begin to talk. Your imitations of the older animals, read your mother and father and peers. Those are a minute older than you are. You are then in the city. You take all local views, statements of reality as being complete or potentially complete, offering the feast if you can manage to grab all the needed crumbs. You are then a little person. Now, pressing on with this possible sub-myth, my little legend, had I done it, might have gone a bit further and said that these kind of creatures that my legend might have sometime referred to as revolutionists, intellectual subversives, people interested in this kind of stuff, that it might be that these kinds of intellectual revolutionists, nervous system travelers, soon grew tired of the city's amusements, threats, promises, award ceremonies. And these creatures began to long for a new, a more advanced kind of thicket. And so in a sense they are driven, but remember the spatial flaws in even 3D models, much less my 2D picturization of a 3D model. But they're drawn out of the city back, but just to keep it a little interesting, let's say that all the humans of this city were born up in here, according to that creation myth. They're drawn out of the city, but let us just say, keep it interesting, out of the city back to a unexplored, a new, silent kind of secret thicket. Not the old original brambles and bushes, but let's say it's off up here somewhere on the other hillside. If this was even a 3D model, I would have made it to where it was sitting down in the bottom of a bowl. So that the hillsides are on all 360 degrees of sides. But at any rate, the kind of people interested in this, and notice my legend would not have said that they become mad in the sense of being revolutionaries. They do not, in the literal sense, attempt to overthrow the city for all kinds of reasons. There's nothing to overthrow. And if that's wrong, if there is something to overthrow and they overthrew it, they'd be overthrowing themselves. And if they weren't overthrowing themselves, if there was something to overthrow, they'd be overthrowing that which they breathe, and so they wouldn't do it. And it's not that they're hostile toward the city. No, I think if I had had such a subplot within this kind of legend, that it would have said that these few people grow tired. I mean that fairly, or as much as possible, innocuously. Not angry, not mad. Just kind of tired of all of the diversions, all the ceremonies, the threats, the promises, just the general activities. Don't get hostile. They don't try to dissuade others from pursuing them. They understand, in a crude way, that what they're after is something outside the city, and that it would be silent. That is, they don't know what to call it themselves. And it would be out in the thickets. You understand, I'm using thickets sort of as a parallel, quasi-synonym for the original part of my possible subplot of speaking about people being born in the bushes and the brambles. I just didn't want to say the same thing, because then you would be where many peoples throughout history have had the idea if there is some sort of other activity, it's always where? Mush, you nervous systems, forward as fast as possible to the past. That is, the real revolutionists do not imagine, wait a minute, I should have never left the hillside. It's the downfall of man. It is us leaving Rousseau's Bar and Grill. We have fallen from grace and fell into the city and became sophisticated and worldly wise, and therefore worldly weary. We need to go back into the brambles and the bushes. The real revolutionist, now he may fall for that once or twice, because the real revolutionist normally has no real starting place. He stumbles around, he finds books, he hears city myths, corporate legends already extant in the city, and so he may stumble around, and it catches attention that they say what we should do is get back to our roots, spiritually speaking, intellectually speaking, some way, but it's always forward into the past. And so for a while it may strike him, if for no other reason, based upon, hey, what other trains seem to be leaving town? He didn't know what else to do. But a real revolutionist soon finds out that those that say forward, a tempo, accelerando to the past, he finds out that if indeed these people that are proclaiming this do have some train or some path, it takes them a short period of time to realize, I don't want to travel with them. No offense to them, but I do not care to be locked up in a rocket train with these folks. Not at this particular point in time. So, at any rate, I was going to try and get you to see that still, when I'm saying thickets, so that I will not say brambles and bushes, and then if your nervous system go, aha, to go back closer to the days that you were before you were, or that kind of pseudo-poetic, I don't want to say crap, so say anything you want to. Useless journeys. But he does understand that what I'm looking for is not here in the city. That wherever it is somewhat hidden. It's obviously silent because I do not hear it hollering, calling out my name. Indeed, everyone who seems to be calling out and saying, train to a new place, are the ones I get over there, and it's that same group of people. No offense to them, but it's that same group of people saying forward into the past, and everything's going to hell faster than even people in downtown city. Just ordinary people. They all know everything's going to hell. But these kind of people even seem to be more driven by this knowledge, and even if they're correct, I just don't care to travel with them. I got my own baggage, and I'll be damned if I'm going to be locked up in a cattle car with a bunch of people hollering, oh, any minute now, any minute now. We're all going to get it. And it's going to be our just desserts, too. And then at least sort of the tacit addendum to that, well, at least a few of us, I bet the gods will reward us for at least right before the fact itself happened, that we knew it was all going to hell. So in some way the gods are going to reward us. You can't really go into that in any intellectual depth, or as you might imagine, it becomes like a Rorschach test that was left out in the rain. By the way, while we're here and me mentioning real revolutionists sort of tiring of the city and feeling the need to try and discover a new secret place in the thickets. Could I ask you this? Maybe it should be a Kairoot someday, but what is the difference between motivation and irritation? Oh, well. And one other thing I might point out, that when it gets to this, before we pursue even this any further, but from all of the little parts of the legend that I might have relayed, if in fact I had ever relayed the legend itself, I could also throw in maybe an ad hoc axiom at this point, and that would be that a real revolutionist, a real intellectual subversive, would not be all that concerned over the actual existence of a revolutionary camp somewhere, so long as there's a trail there too. Do I have to say think about that? I guess I do if any of you are still operating on autopilot at the ordinary intellectual level, because it ain't going to think about that. Or if it does, it's going to say, well, you can't think about that. That's silly to say that somebody does not care whether there's actually this place, so long as there's a trail apparently there too. Well, I will admit this is in complete opposition, you might say. Just complete opposition in the 3D world to many of the city notions, particularly religious notions. What else is the basis? You have got to have absolutely firm ideas and teachings of the existence of the gods, an afterlife, possible reward and punishment, that you would have no religions. You'd have probably no, under ordinary conditions as they are now, you'd have no sense of morality. You would have no human continuing institutions from one generation to another if things operate on the basis that if, instead of me saying a real revolutionist and or would-be revolutionist in a possible new area of thickets, a new place where he might grow off on his own, instead of that, if we said plug in, instead of a revolutionist, someone interested in politics, someone interested in social justice, someone interested in the world of academia, the world of the mind, the arts, to say that any of them, the would-be artist, doesn't care whether there's really any such thing as art, as long as there apparently is this alleyway going there. You understand? Does everybody get the way I'm putting it? I'm being very judicious in my choice and limitations of words. A would-be artist does not care if there is such a thing as art, as long as there is a alleyway going there too. But notice, that's the end of the quote. Notice the last part, as long as there is an alleyway there too, that does not make the first part of it change. That doesn't say, well, that proves there's one. No. Of course, ordinary intellect, again, I might say, how about thinking about it because it does not want to? Because it's saying, well, wait a minute, if you're going to say that there is a trail there too, or that there is an alleyway there too, then you're saying that the first part of the sentence was sort of inconclusive. Because then you're saying, all right, if there is a trail there too, then there is a revolutionary count. Listen, it's my goddamn sentence. I'll say it any way I want to. A would-be, a real subversive, does not actually care if there's a revolutionary count as long as there is a trail there too. Now, your ordinary intellect is going to say, well, if you're saying there's a trail there too, I know a little bit about linguistics and rhetoric and the laws of English and the laws of German if they had any. And if you're going to say the trail there too, then you're then saying in that last part of the sentence that there is a revolutionary count. I repeat, it's my sentence, and I stick with it. It still doesn't matter whether there's one as long as there's a trail going there. There is a certain kind of beauty I was hoping some of you glimpse right quick. This was really a side step. That this is in direct opposition, not just when I used religion as the first example. It's not just in that field, it is the operations of the nervous system under the weight of spatial reality, the three dimensions. But religion is just the great one. Why would anybody pursue a religion, or a philosophy, but a religion, if you in advance that everybody involved with it was all the same agreement that we do not know that there is actually an end to this. That is, a purpose, a goal, a conclusion, a finish line, a payoff. We don't know that. And everybody goes, yeah, I'm with you. We're not fooling each other. We're not hypnotizing each other. We have no priest, beating in a swill bucket. We all agree without any hesitation that we do not know if there's a payoff. Right? Do any of us care? No, we don't care. As long as there seems to be the breadcrumbs. As long as there seems to be a pathway. That, may I suggest to you, will not fly in the city. You can't even get a string or a tail tied on that. But it's never going to fly because it is past being insane and irrational. Way past that. It's only ordinary three-dimensional intelligence that thinks that the final denunciation regarding one's mental processes is to say, well, what you just said is irrational. That's actually, from a more universal, a more complex view, that's a pretty soft insult. See if you can shift the paragraph a little bit. And take note of this. Down in the city, in ordinary affairs, no matter how important, no matter how mundane they might appear to be, there's an operation, there's a dynamic that takes place everywhere at all times. Part of life's own body, but I'll start out apparently just discussing a good external, physically conceivable, routine operation. And that is, you have individuals with similar interests and concerns, if this concern is going to have any viability, if life needs it, if the humans seem to need it. But you have individuals being attracted together, brought together, and then they become a group. They begin to lobby politically, religiously, socially, small labels just in the community, just in one block, in the whole districts and wards within a city. But they are drawn together into a group and they begin to lobby, and then they begin to be able to exercise some influence toward the ends of gaining their goals. That was a long way, but that is simply the way things work. I assume all of you understand that. They are the way history has to, in the intellect, deal with things. I know there seems to be heroes in life, but no one man anywhere, nobody, even the so-called religious heroes, if you look at it this way, which is not asking you to be intellectually blasphemous, no one person ever does anything. Now, he may or she may apparently be the spark plug, but this one person, a voice in the wilderness, will forever stay a voice in the wilderness and will be forgotten unless some other people come stumbling out and go, hey, I like that, or how much you paying to be a follower? Whatever it is, they got to end up with some kind of, apparently, forget the paying. That was a joke. Similar interest and concern, and it's got to be a group of people. One person does not have any great effect on history, historically or even right now. One congressman, one senator, the titular head of a whole government, a prime minister, a king, a president. One person does not have, cannot have, any real lobbying influence. Even the king, if he stands up alone and says, I'm going to do so-and-so, he can say that, we'll assume he's the king, and he has the highest place in the city. His throne's up on top of 4 or 5 little short people's thrones. So he can get up and say, I want to do so-and-so. Now he can say that, but it is not going to have any effect unless there is a group. Unless he has some faithful courtiers, some retainers, some prime ministers, some knights, some serfs. Of course, if it was up high, I guess what would happen? The king would holler, the serf's up. Never mind. I must apologize. But that's not true. I must apologize. But at any rate, it is a simple fact. That's enough entertainment. Things do not get done in the three-dimensional world of life. Things do not happen in the flow of humanity based upon one person. No matter who you think about in history, great religious leaders, great political leaders, you simply must see this. They always, if indeed they are after the fact apparently going to have some impact on history, then that means that life has some specific interest in what this person seems to represent when they first start speaking and moving. But they will attract those who have similar interest. And they will form a group, no matter what it's called. I'm using lobby in the full emblematic sense of the word, the connotation of the word. They exert themselves as a group. One person can do nothing. I don't care whether it's Churchill, de Gaulle, Jesus, Moses, no one. That's not the way life operates. All it takes is just a modicum, a split second of fairly fresh thought, and you realize that's true. Comma. Now would you like to ponder your own brain sight in regards to this kind of stuff? And take note that there is no group of cerebral structures with a common interest in this kind of stuff. No sirree. Well, that's, I know, somewhat archaic Germanic political talk, but it translates into no sirree. It's almost like you got just one little guy, the kid. One little kid, one little guy, one little brain cell by itself. Curious after this kind of stuff. And again, I guess I should apologize for those whose hobby is suffering. I hate to give you the blues. But there is something useful to consider when you're trying to consider all of this stuff. We're trying to pull up on some kind of deep resources, or in some way cosmic forces will lend themselves to assisting you at clearer, more revolutionary, insightful insight. Well, again, as some of the German philosophers would say, fat chance. I think it came from all the starches that's indigenous to the Germanic diet. There is no collection of cells. You have already wired up, primed up in you. Let's go into the secondary affairs, which are the ones that are uniquely human. Any interest you have, and it doesn't matter what, stamp collecting, fashion, gourmet dining, sports, there are collections of cells, not one cell. They are drawn together, and it's this interest that lobbies for your attention. That is the only way it occurs. And you can have, if you care to push this a little further, I don't know why I have to prove more complex reality to any of you. Well, he just pointed out to me I don't. So there. All right, I'll see you next time. But if you consider it this way, take whatever hobby you have. Let's say it's music. Maybe attempting to write and perform music. There is not one cell, and there's not even 4 or 5 cells that are interested only in that. Or else that would not be your hobby. You might look at it as being peripheral, or if you're ordinary, you might try to argue with this, but there are other payoffs involved. There are people, there are other cells up here. Look at this. You can look at it like cells or people, whichever is the easiest for you. And if one of them's easier than another, please don't tell me. I think I started to say bad enough of you already. But that was a joke too, and some of you people on tape might take it personally. You've got cells that, let us say, that as pristinely as possible are interested in playing the accordion and singing and writing perhaps original accordion music. But if indeed it is strong enough, that is, your interest is strong enough that you do pursue this in some overt manner, then there will be not only those cells, either cell or cells, there will be cells who have similar interest, but it's got to be different cells, like different people. That perhaps these other cells, their interest is simply this: I want to show off. And if you say, well, do you care how? I mean, are you interested in the accordion? What the hell with the accordion? I don't care what. Will the accordion get me shown off? Well, it might. Hey, where did I sign up? And they'll join in the lobbying effort. You simply got to understand that in all enterprises, in all systems in the 3D world, in the city, if it's alive, it has got fragmentation to it, the same way as reality. There is no such thing as one force, one set of peoples, one set of interests can move, can have their way. They're not even alive. They cannot breathe unless you have different factions within it. There is no such thing as the pure Democratic Party, the pure Whigs or Tories. Within it has to be factions. There's no such thing as a pure Jew. There has to be within that, within the Judaism, there has to be the different fragments of Orthodox and Reformed, etc. It's true in anything. We've been through this enough. You have got to have more than one apparent force. We can call it other things. Interest, types of people, or the thing is not alive. It's moribund. You may be able to identify it historically after the fact and say, well, that was at one time seemed to be some interest. But it was no more than life going, let's see, I think I'll have a rutabaker. No, I won't. And that's the end of it. And so somewhere it might have lingered in the memory cells, and somebody remembers it, but it did not actually have any life. What was that? Wandering off far enough. Back to where we were, which was? In any interest, even if it seemed to be playing the accordion, writing original accordion music, you would have, if it indeed had a life within you, you would have variations within that. Not only the group that seemed to be, what we want is to play accordion music and sing. Then you'd have those that say, well, we just like to show off. And they don't really care how, but this seems to be the only game going in you. So, we'll pursue this. You might have others that say, I'd like to have more money, and I'd like to get it as efficiently as possible, especially in light of how much energy is involved. And this group may realize people in showbiz, once they get going, they only come out and actually work 3 or 4 hours a night as opposed to 8 hours out here in the ditches. So they join in. Any interest you have in secondary affairs, any interest you have that is in the city, that is down there and apparently is based there, can apparently be rewarded there, can apparently be executed there, practiced in the professional sense. It takes more than one person. Now, turn it back inside. It is this kind of stuff that with a few people that might be interested in it for whatever strange reason, flies in the face of this reality. Because there is no common collection, there is no neighborhood, there is no community of cells in any of you, in anybody, that has some sort of comparative, non-competitive, overlapping interest. Now, if we stopped and grabbed people's nervous system that might be seeing this for the first few times, or might think they find some intellectual curiosity in this, and I shook their little nervous system, they might go, wait a minute, that's not true. Because some of me likes this I like the intellectual stimulation, and then other parts of me like other things it's hard for me to say. But you would then start getting into, let's assume there was some validity to someone saying, well, I do have a real intellectual interest in this, what little I can understand of it now, but what you just said is not exactly true because that's not my only interest. All right, tell me more. Well, I enjoy being here. Aha. Well, what do you mean? Well, I enjoy just being here with the people. Ah, so that's really related, yeah. Sure, same way that sex is related to accordions. I don't guess I'll pursue it if you don't see it. I don't mean the connection between sex and accordions. Literally. I want to point out literally, lest any of you hurt yourself through some experiment that I did not intend. The intent was to get you to see that if indeed someone said, I do have, and let's say I'm not arguing, it's in some way a fact in the world, that someone says, now I do have at least one cell in my brain that is attracted to this. There's no doubt. If I say, okay, and then you say, but what you just said about that there is no collection, that's not true. It is true. Because anything else that you would say from any ordinary view, which is the only reason you would ever say this, that you would say, well, I do have some close community cells that have maybe not the exact interest as this first cell that brought me to this or holds me to this, but I got some that are peripherally, coevally, neighborly interested. In the same way that you were saying that you could have cells that were interested in playing the accordion and singing, and then you have some other cells that say, well, I'm interested, I just want to be in showbiz, I want to show off. And so I can say, wait a minute, is your only interest in playing the accordion? And the second group of cells might say, well, no, but I got nothing against the accordion, and that seems to be the most talent that you have in here, that is, in this one person, and so it's fine with me. So you can say, well, their interests are not exactly the same, but by God, I mean, they overlap to such a degree, you got to be in show business to play the accordion for a living. So it is not true to say that the only thing driving my hobby is purely the love of the accordion. It's got to be other things, and there's nothing wrong with it. Right. Now back to. There are no supporting, there are no neighborly, there are no commonly cause-based cells interested in this other than whatever cell you might have that is interested in this. Anything else, your imagination. Well, I like to be here. Well, hell, you like to be in a movie. Yeah, but it's not the same. Sometimes it makes me feel better. Well, hell, cocaine will make you feel better. Yeah, but that ain't the same. I'm telling you this for a reason, not to give you the blues or not even to cheer you people up that have the blues, because it's not up to me to theoretically harm your wild duck. It is as though whatever cell you have interested in this, it's as though you got one little kid, one cell, that's curious about this. But he got or she got no support. Assuming there is gender to brain cells. There is no support. There is no lobbying effort. And that one cell does not say, hey, I find this interesting, and suddenly out of the bushes of your own cerebral frontal lobes, other cells go, well, that ain't bad. We'll come out and consider it. You know what? I find that interesting. You may say so, but it's got the same relationship as fornication does to an ocarina. Just in case any of you do run amok, I was hoping that you'd do less possible damage to yourself erotically with an ocarina than you would an accordion. How about another slight paragraph? There is another unnoted civil matter. By civil matter, of course, I mean it's city-based. And it goes like this. It's said, but you'll see in a second, I assume, it's said and it's been repeated and written, and it's not really noted, but it is on the basis that progress in the study of man, both somatically and non-somatically, that is what appears to be physically, just the crude physical parts and otherwise, that progress, the most progress has been made in the study of man, in the soft fields. And I said, psychology, religion, sociology, anthropology, and then medicine. But the most progress has been made in the study of man by the study of the malfunctions. Now, all of you are well read enough to know that, whether you knew that, or whether you knew that you had read that, or whether the people who said it, even knew what they were saying. At their own level they did. How about a more specific quote? Of course, I'm paraphrasing and putting together several over our lifetimes, but it would go something like this. That specifically, the greatest progress made in the study of man's brain has been via the investigation of madness. All of you have heard that, some version of it. Now that's of more consequence. I wasn't going to lay on the physical side, but the history of Western medicine, the world of earthly medicine. Even today, it just seems to be a little more subtle. But the study of man, the study of cutting up cadavers, trying to anatomically understand man, has always been on the basis, without them really knowing it, even at times when they said it, they didn't understand what they were saying, but on the basis of illness. If you had a med school somewhere, and they had one guy or one woman to study, that they were up to date enough that they were not left with just cadavers, they actually had a living cadaver. And this person had no illnesses whatsoever. Do you realize that there you would sit for 4 or 5 years? Everybody would sit there waiting for this person to show a symptom of something. Now, if it was possible to be alive and have no symptoms, let us say that this was it. But you understand, you could learn nothing. Don't let your ordinary intellect say, well, that's not true, because you could study the person as they are and know something about them. Wait a minute. Who are you going to listen to, me or your own brain? Not so fast. No, that's too obvious. The progress made in the study of man has been through the investigation, through the study of the malfunctioning of his functions, not the proper ones. It's a whole other area that leads nowhere. And specifically, the greatest breakthroughs in our understanding of the human brain has been via the clinical study of madness. For years, some of you people too young to know it, but I'll just point out, it just struck my little memory, that for years and years in the earlier parts of this century, in the sections in psychology, if you'd walk in a library and you look, the psychology, every title for years and years had, somewhere in the title was the word abnormal. There was no such thing as the study of man's psychology, the study of a group of Turks' psychology, a group of drinkers' psychology. It was always the abnormal psychology of whatever group it was, even the abnormal psychology of otherwise normal people. Consider that. I don't have time to try and force this down your throat, which wouldn't work anyway. But what I have pointed out is strictly, in a more complex view, valid. Anthropology, sociology, psychology, any other ologies. The soft sciences are what I was leaning on to start with. Religion. All of their study, any knowledge that they say they have, any data they have that they say is operational and useful, is based upon a study of malfunctions in their particular area. They obviously do not any longer identify it as such, because all books on psychology do not now necessarily contain the word abnormal. But what survives? What is salient to ordinary intelligence? What is obvious? But now consider this. what we were discussing only a few tapings ago, the fact that once a man gives his position away, once a man, even outside the city up here in the bushes somewhere, once he will stand up and holler, hey, I'm up here reconnoitering, I'm up here trying to get a new view of the city, I'm up here trying to find a new thicket where I might get new observations and new knowledge, but here I am, coordinates to follow. That once life knows where you are, once you have given away your position, which you're supposed to do, then you can only see, you will only be shown that which life, that is, look at as being that which you're struggling against, your opponent, if you will only let you see that which is of no particular logistical, military significance. It will only let you see that which is obvious anyway, meaningless. It will shift over, if it has to, everyday operations that can be the information thereof, the knowledge thereof, can be of no particular benefit to you. So, all of you understood that a few tapings ago. So keeping that in mind, and now moving from strictly the soft sciences regarding the fact that I'm saying the possibility that all progress, all knowledge that men have about man could be based upon the study of malfunctions. Now let's go past the soft sciences. What if we go into the so-called hard sciences? And what is a so-called, now I'm not arguing about it, what's assumed to be a strictly hardball, hardwired scientific view that which scientists investigate all of the operations, all of the movements, cosmically, subatomically, all the laws. What if everything they see is reality run amok? What if all scientific knowledge, all scientific discoveries, all breakthroughs are all observations of a malfunction? Think about it. I don't think in some way to try and turn this into ordinary logic and pick out something specific like the general law of relativity. But consider back where I started just a few minutes ago, this tie-in, that if life indeed is only going to let people see that which is of no particular consequence at that moment, it's not going to let people see individually and then have a collective effect, that is. There are individuals that get glimpses, of course. But they're not going to let life, some large segment of life, see that which is really of any specific significance, any upsetting significance, any revolutionary significance into the operations of city life down here. If that be true, then go past what seems to be pretty soft science and pretty subjective in the ordinary way of religion and psychology, get into physics, astronomy. What if even then the only thing that life, piece by piece, I know it keeps changing, it seems to expand and piece together, but the only thing that life shows to even a no-nonsense, atheistic, anti-psychiatric physicist like me, I only deal with the facts, ma'am and sir, that's all I'm interested in, that the only facts it sees are malfunctions. It's reality run amok. But if you've got nothing to compare it to, they don't say, well, wait a minute, I have discovered finally the unifying field theory. What have they got to compare it to? I have discovered, I have deduced, I have postulated the special theory of revolution, of relativity. But what if the basis of all the observations that life allows, and then consequently, as it would seem, to be ordinary cause and effect, but still the dancing partner, the dancing team, that which life apparently reveals, that through the microscope, through the technology, through some kind of thought experiment, but apparently what you observe and then what you conclude, be you in Einstein and Newton, that what if that is still, in a quite real sense, since there's no way to compare it and they would never know, that what they are observing are malfunctions. They're observing reality mad and amok. Now, not in some objective manner, but all they're observing, in a sense, is an anomaly. But the anomaly then becomes a law. It becomes a consistent. if indeed life needs it, because then other people can repeat it, other people can make the same observation, and then this piece of malfunctioning becomes a reality. And indeed, anyone who says, wait a minute, the whole theory of special relativity is insane. Now, once it's accepted, then those in the city charged with this kind of responsibility don't even have to break into sweat to know that indeed you're insane, not them, because they know that's a fact. They all look at each other, yeah, it's a fact, yeah, sure it is, hasn't changed since last week. And so they know that you're an idiot. So the malfunction, that which was mad and amok in a sense, is now the routine. But notice, there's only two possibilities after that. It may be routine, it may be reality for a while, and then it's forgotten. Or, what happens? Somebody expands on it. Somebody improves the observation. Somebody extends the theory. That is, they find a new anomaly. They don't look at it this way. I know that in science they'll say things like, well, this new theory, this new discovery, does answer or suggests some answers regarding some older questions, but darn it, it seems to produce brand new questions. Now I know they say that, but they ignore the fact they're not wired up to see that, wait a minute, what was a theory? What was reality? What was Newtonian physics? Now that we've gone into quantum physics, what they're saying without knowing it is, wait a minute, we are now discovering laws or observing movements that are malfunctions. They don't call it that. But what now they think they're observing is really malfunctioning of Newtonian physics. Well, if you want it softer, a Muhammad who says, I have new revelations, or a Moses who says, I have new words from the gods, what he is saying without knowing it is, I now see malfunctions of the prior religions. He says it's an improvement. The people take it as an improvement. In the community of physics, after a short period of time, as it so happened, they took quantum physics as being an improvement over Newtonian. They took non-Euclidean geometry as being an improvement. But at the time, it is seeing madness. They can say it in the human mind regarding that well, some of our greatest strides in understanding the operations of the human brain, without any doubt, believe it or not, has been through the study of madness. That is, seeing how the brain operates when it is not functioning correctly. And all of you should be well read enough, it doesn't take much to understand it. Yeah, that's true. That's the way it did historically work, and they still operate that way. That's the way to see, as they might put it, I'm sure somebody has, the way to see the proper functioning, let's stick with the brain for a second, this organism, this function, this instrumentality, the way to have a better concept of its proper functioning, since we're still somewhat in the dark. We don't know everything about the human brain. We don't know everything about the atom. Is to see the ways which are glaring, obvious to a well-trained eye, maybe even some intellectual layman, is to see it when it's malfunctioning. Because then we can begin to kind of put things together and blah, blah, blah. Think about it. What if everything humanity knows from a more complex view, that everything he knows, including all good, hard, irrefutable facts, are observations of malfunctions? And off stage, that Greek choir, which is, of course, as all of you know by now, is not actually a Greek choir, but they keep passing themselves off, they want to sing out, wouldn't that explain a lot? If any of you care to push it, since I had already tried to apologize if I had interfered with any suffering people's attitude toward life when I inferred that things are not really falling apart, to make up toward the end for you poor viewers, especially those that won't send in those fat letters along with your prayers. There's room in those envelopes for more than your little chintzy-ass prayers, by the way. You could drop in a little something, so to speak, for me and the Lord. But at any rate, it's not a business, so I'm going to give it to you whether you send me anything in the envelope or not. What if you looked at it this way, in a more specific level, that man's eyes are attuned to an heretofore unrecognized pathological area of the intellectual spectrum? Think about it. Now talk about explain some stuff so that it would be not only those things that strike you immediately, you or anybody else, that strike you as being morbific, horrific, ill. Not only those areas, which everybody's nervous system sees plenty of those, but then, talk about further explanations, then the areas that do not seem to fit those categories, like stuff that's goodness. Except all goodness is immediately, just right around the corner, just a split second away, as all ordinary brains know, filled with the potential to be otherwise. That all the goodness, charitable works, family love, sexual fidelity, that all of that, as fine as it is, and thank God that there are some things like that in life rather than all these despicable areas like hunger and pestilence and April the 15th. That there over here there are, per se, things, instruments, instrumentalities, nouns, verbs, operations that are good, comma, except as everyone knows, they are a hairbreadth away, just the same as a human organism is, from being ill. That is, of goodness. It's just one step away from this great religion saying we love you. And anyone who did not send money this week, we have your name and you will be shot by sundown. People, oh, that's the way life is. How ironic. No. What if the intellectual spectrum, if man is attuned without knowing it, not only to see areas which to everyone individually seems to be questionable, malfunctions, ills, flawed, but what if everything he sees, even those that immediately do not seem to fit those kind of definitions, those kind of categories, regardless, it's always just a breath away, like I'm healthy as hell. That the whole spectrum in which man can think, that this whole area has never been identified. It's a subspectrum within the electromagnetic spectrum, a subspectrum that is the pathological spectrum. That is, everything that life reveals to the intellect, in a sense, is a malfunction, or else the human intellect could not see it. We're out of tape, so those of you that are already off the tape, hey, that's right, I can talk about them any way I want to. Charity begins, where is it, Norfolk? By